Greetings, everyone. It is incredibly exciting to see all of you here come together from all over the world, and what an unbelievably beautiful venue for the second Planetary Health Annual Meeting. It's wonderful to have you all here. My name is Sam Myers. I'm the director of the Planetary Health Alliance, and with support from the Rockefeller Foundation and the Wellcome Trust, it is our enormous pleasure to facilitate this second meeting of the rapidly growing planetary health community. While we help to support this meeting, it has been our enormous good fortune to partner with Liz Grant and her team here at the University of Edinburgh. Liz and her team really should get all the credit for the truly, Herculean task of conceptualizing, planning, and implementing a very complex meeting with literally thousands of moving parts and enormous logistical complexity. So Liz has made it look effortless, but don't let that fool you. She has dedicated really an enormous amount of her personal time to the hard work of creative thinking that has given this meeting its unique shape, and to following up on that thinking with all the logistical detail that's required for such a complex endeavor. So please join me in giving Liz and her team a huge round of applause. So while Liz has been the conductor, there has been an orchestra of additional helping hands behind the scenes. In addition to Liz and her team at the University of Edinburgh, the staff of the Planetary Health Alliance has put tremendous effort into supporting the development of Liz's vision. We've also had very important sponsorship from numerous organizations that you can see listed in supporting regional hubs, in connecting us with additional diverse communities from around the world, and through a series of very generous travel scholarships to support our commitment to having at least 30% of our attendees coming here from the global south. In addition, we have had scores of individuals assisting with the development of our program, with reviewing abstracts, with judging photos for our photo contest, with supporting our Emerging Scholars Network, and assisting us with communications. In addition, I want to give a special shout out to Chris Golden, who has really single-handedly led our effort to evaluate and award scholarships to travel participants from the Global South. Chris is the Associate Director of the Planetary Health Alliance, and he is also about to step into a brand new position as the first ever tenure-track faculty member at Harvard University in planetary health. So the field of planetary health has been really developing and growing very rapidly, with new journals becoming established and widely read, courses in planetary health proliferating around the world, new professorships, as I mentioned, in planetary health being established, and numerous organizations, including many of our UN organizations, really embracing planetary health as a framework for thinking about the Sustainable Development Goals. The Planetary Health Alliance has also been growing since our last annual meeting a year ago in April. Our institutional membership has roughly doubled to 110 member institutions from over 30 countries. And the number of people subscribing to our monthly newsletter has more than doubled. And if any of you are not among them, come to the Planetary Health Alliance website and sign up for our newsletter. Finally, I wanted to send the warmest greetings from Amalia Almada, who is our Senior Program Manager for the Planetary Health Alliance. Amalia has been out the last 3 months on maternity leave and just came back to work last week. This is her 3-month-old Alina, who is the most recent member of the planetary health community. So Amalia is very sorry not to be here with us in person and looks forward both to coming and to bringing Alina to the next annual meeting. And with that, I will finish and let Liz have the podium.
So, welcome so much to Edinburgh. Welcome to this amazing building, an amazing city, a wonderful university. And most of all, welcome because today we can have conversations about planetary health, and each of you brings something to the table. And over the course of these next 3 days, you've got, it's a busy program with lots of ideas, lots of speaking from the front, but actually, the real part will be how we speak to each other. And just for a second, turn around to somebody you don't know and say who you are. Just say, it's good to be here, to someone else. Yeah. So, you've had a chance to chat. What I'm going to do now is encourage you to listen to each other and to listen back again. Thank you. It's great to have conversation. And what you can find, we want when we come to discussion to be in a situation now where you can stand up and we can ask questions together and we're not feeling inhibited by the size and space of this amazing building. I just want to say then a couple of things around the ambition. The Global Health Academy is one of 5 academies here at the university, and you'll see pieces of each of those academies displayed through these next couple of days. The Global Health Academy is built on 3 premises, which I think you all identify with. One is the equality of humanity. Do we really believe we're equal? Because that matters. The next is that the answers to the world's questions are actually already in the world already, but we don't listen to the voices of those who often have the answers. That's very true of academia. We need to listen out. And the third is that premise that in this perfect storm we're facing, we need to be together, we need to connect together, and disciplines need to come and work together, because without that, things won't happen. Sir Andy Haynes, who's here, who was chair of the Rockefeller Lancet Commission on Planetary Health, along with Sam and many others, wrote in that commission about three challenges, 3 lacks: a lack of science, a lack of imagination, and a lack or a failure of implementation. And I hope, as you listen to the different talks, you can think, are there ways that we can bring or speak to this lack of imagination? Because there's no shortage of imagination in this hall as we look at thinking differently, thinking outside of the box, thinking who else, what other communities should we engage with? There's wonderful science here. And remember that all of what we hear needs to be implemented. Words are the bane of the 21st century. Words without movement, words without action. We don't want to be known as the 21st century that was a century of words. So action is key. And for me, the core of planetary health work is around compassion. Because only if we really believe in each other and the equality of each other and the fact that we are in this together, will each of the 17 SDGs be met? Will each of the ambitions for planetary health be brought together? It really requires us to be compassionate, to care, to have a value with each other. So with that, can I call upon our principal, Sir Peter Matheson, who's going to come and speak to you, just give greetings from the University of Edinburgh. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Liz. What Liz's little experiment illustrated just then with her exhortation to you to introduce yourself was the willingness to have conversations, and that actually is quite a significant moment, I think, because that's really why we justify having this kind of meeting. Obviously, in the age of technology, there's a big argument about whether you need to bring people from all over the planet to get together and have conferences, but that little hubbub that you created then illustrated for me why this does work and why interpersonal connections are really important in terms of promoting whatever mission it is that we're about. So I've just, as Liz said, my name is Peter Matheson. I have the pleasure of being the principal of the University of Edinburgh. This hall, McEwan Hall, has recently been refurbished. This is the hall in which we do our graduations. So if any of you in the hall are Edinburgh graduates, you may have memories of this room. It's been spruced up a little bit in recent years, so I'm glad that you're able to enjoy such a beautiful setting. I also have to apologize for the weather. If those of you that arrived yesterday would have seen some beautiful blue sky, and I've been telling everybody for the last few days that this is absolutely typical Edinburgh weather. But I have to be honest and admit that this morning is a bit more typical. This is what we call a haar. So the haar is a sea mist which comes in around this time of year and cloaks the city. And if you want to get rid of it, you have to go about 10 miles inland. So I can't promise you blue sky today, but I can promise you a warm Edinburgh welcome. I suppose there might be some topics which are more important to the human race than planetary health, but I'm having a bit of difficulty thinking of them. I think for all of us, we are concerned about our own health, but we're also concerned about the health of the planet, the health of the future generations, and particularly our children and that beautiful baby that Sam showed just now, her planet and the planet that she and her children are going to inherit. So I've had the pleasure in the last few days of listening to 2 lectures in Edinburgh. One was last night by one of our new professors, Devi Sridhar, who was talking about antimicrobial resistance. And the other one was by the Chief Medical Officer, Dame Sally Davis, who also talked about antimicrobial resistance and talked about climate change and water and air quality and all the various other challenges that I know you'll cover in the next part of your meeting. These are really significant societal challenges. I'm delighted that Edinburgh has been able to facilitate the bringing together of experts from all over the world. Welcome to all of those of you that are here. I hope you have time to enjoy some of the city. I'll add my congratulations to Liz and team. I know from my own experience the effort that goes into organising international conferences. If she's looking relaxed, it's because the time's finally come and everybody's here. There's one person who's not here yet that we're still expecting, and that's the Lord Provost of the City of Edinburgh, Frank Ross, and we're not sure exactly when he's going to arrive, but we think he'll arrive sometime soon, and he will formally welcome you to the City of Edinburgh. But my job on behalf of the university is just to wish you every success for your conference and every good speed in bringing some conclusions to the very important questions which I know you're going to debate. Thank you all for coming.
Thanks. So, Dr. Achim Steiner, from the head of UNDP, was trying to get here and was unable to get here at the last minute. So he has sent a video message for us, and it's going to be played now. It's just a short message of greeting. He also sent a message to the Interaction Council, which met yesterday here, that council of previous heads of state to talk about planetary health as well. So we're going to have this video now from Dr. Achim Steiner.
Good morning. I wish I could have been with you in Edinburgh as you meet to discuss planetary health. In many respects, the statistics, the numbers and the research have pointed us for decades towards understanding more the connections and the challenges we face. But just for those who may not be aware of some of the latest data, let me repeat a few numbers just to demonstrate how significant, for instance, the finding is that almost a quarter of global death attributed to unhealthy environments, the evidence for action on planetary health is therefore hard to ignore. Air pollution kills 7 million people each year. Ecological and environmental factors drive the spread of disease from Ebola to Zika virus. And by 2050, climate change could impact agricultural production, leading to an additional 500,000 deaths because of dietary and weight-related factors. Our very survival today relies on the health of our planet. But we must sound the alarm without inciting fatalism. To do this, let's talk about successes as often as we talk about obstacles. This year, a NASA study used satellite data to confirm that the Montreal Protocol is decreasing Antarctic chlorine levels, and the hole in our ozone layer has begun to shrink. Innovation and incentives have brought down the price of renewable resources of energy, and we can learn from public health successes. The price of HIV drugs was lowered from $10,000 per patient per year in 2000 to less than $1 a day today. Smoke-free public spaces are increasingly the norm. It's time for a social movement around planetary health, one which addresses the needs of the poorest, brings health, equity, and environmental justice communities together, and new partners to the table. This month, I had the privilege to sign a memorandum of agreement with the Director General of the World Health Organization, committing our organizations, UNDP and WHO, to scale up multi-sectoral responses to health challenges arising from climate change and environmental problems, and to do so in the context of the SDGs and the attempt to move towards universal health care. None of us can tackle the scale and complexity of planetary health challenges alone. Success requires contributions from all of us. Academics to create new evidence through interdisciplinary research, the private sector to deliver clean and affordable solutions, civil society to witness and advocate for the most vulnerable, and finally leaders at the local, national and global levels to exercise their power bravely. I commend the Interaction Council, a group of former heads of government who have come together for collaborative action on One Health for people and the planet. Work at the nexus of environment and health is critical for achieving the Sustainable Development Goals and ensuring that all people can live in dignity. I wish you a very fruitful discussion and thank you for the opportunity to address you by means of this message this morning. Bye-bye.
With that, it's my very great pleasure to welcome and introduce to you, to give him his full title, the Right Honourable Lord Lieutenant and Lord Provost of the City of Edinburgh, Frank Ross. Welcome, Frank.
Good morning, ladies and gentlemen, and thank you for the opportunity of speaking to you and welcoming you to Edinburgh this morning. I'm delighted that the Planetary Health Alliance has chosen Edinburgh as the host city for what is a very important annual meeting. The impacts of environmental change affect not just our individual health, but as you well know, that of the planet itself. And these issues are complex, and therefore we need significant interdisciplinary collaboration and partnerships to unlock these challenges and to seek creative and sustainable solutions. And therefore I'm very pleased to welcome you all as researchers, policymakers, planners, and indeed local communities to Edinburgh for this key event on planetary health. I hope that you're going to find that the work which is currently taking place at the University of Edinburgh and throughout our city addresses some of these challenges and hopefully offers some inspiration for the debates that will follow over the next few days. I think it is indeed appropriate that this event is taking place in Edinburgh, the birthplace of Sir Patrick Geddes, who studied here at the University of Edinburgh. Geddes had a career that combined several disciplines, including biology, sociology, and geography, and went on to develop pioneering work here in Edinburgh on urban planning. Geddes, in his time, worked to improve living conditions here in Edinburgh, but later in cities such as Tel Aviv and Bombay, focusing importantly, on the relationship between inhabitants and their surroundings. And I think Geddes would be considered an early pioneer in planetary health, coining the phrase, think global, act local, a phrase that is still very valid today and perhaps more so in the 21st century. But also Edinburgh as the home of enlightenment, it's important for us to continue Edinburgh's tradition of pioneering thought, and movers and shakers in planetary health, such as Geddes and a long list of other great innovators in science, are today followed by an incredible talent in technology. Edinburgh is world-renowned as a hub of innovation and entrepreneurial spirit in the technology. And I think one area that we can look forward to is much more innovation from the technological sector to assist us in coming up with new solutions for the protection of our planet. Here in the capital, we've started a program called 2050 Vision, which is consulting the citizens of our city about what they want their city to be. It's a very much a bottom-up approach that we've taken, listening to our citizens. It's not a political movement, it's not any particular ideology, but invariably we find that by consulting and listening to the people, they have a very good idea about what the environment they want to live in and how it impacts their life. And our vision goes beyond just the normal political cycle or the business cycle. We don't want to get drawn into how do we do this specifically. We're trying to create a vision that everybody can then work their own path towards. But from a sustainability perspective, we feel that Edinburgh punches way above its weight. We are the greenest city in the UK. You might not be able to see that today because you can't see very far because of the weather. I'm sure it will brighten up as it did yesterday, but half of the city in Edinburgh is green space, providing not just leisure and recreational space, but also biodiversity and conserving and enhancing the natural environment of our city. We also boast the highest share of travel to work in Scotland by foot, cycle, and by public transport. And indeed, it has the highest share of any city in the UK of bus usage. We also set ourselves one of the most ambitious carbon reduction targets of any city in the UK, with a commitment to reduce carbon emissions by 42% by 2020 against a 2005 baseline. And we've already achieved a 30% reduction on projects. We have a sustainable energy action plan which aims to transform energy use in the city by reducing demand and encouraging local energy generation, something which has been very popular through social enterprises. We also are in a UNESCO World Heritage Centre, buildings such as this where energy conservation can be somewhat difficult. So we're always looking for input that will allow us to come up with sustainable views there. Edinburgh is also world-renowned for its festivals, and I'm greatly encouraged that festivals, an area that perhaps wouldn't normally be seen as taking cognizance of planetary health, has led the way here in Edinburgh. The development of models for carbon emission reporting and for international festivals is groundbreaking, and over 200 cultural organisations have now signed up to that event. A number of festivals now divert 98% of their waste from landfill, promote sustainable travel options for artists and for audiences, and invest in energy efficiency upgrades. And I'm sure you're going to talk about these and many more detailed subjects over the next few days. And I wish the conference every success, and I look forward to hearing the feedback and the outcomes, because we're always willing to listen and to learn here in Edinburgh. I hope that you'll have an opportunity to make new connections here, reinvigorate old ones. However, my last selling point is that Edinburgh is a historic and beautiful city. It's cultural heritage. You've all received in your delegate pack, I hope, your Edinburgh rewards and maps. So I urge you, spend a lot of time coming up with the great solutions that we need for planetary health, but do take time out and enjoy the city that you're visiting. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Lord Provost. Just before we have Elder Francois Paulette speak to us. Can I ask Elder Francois Paulette to come onto the stage, and Hannah and the children from the Children's Parliament? Thank you so much. So Elder Francois.
So I look up at this beautiful ceiling and I see physics and biology and medicine and mathematics, but I also see poetry, divinity, philosophy. I wish I also saw indigenous knowledge. One of the things that we're coming to understand is that underneath the really challenging scientific and technological problems that underpin so many planetary health issues that we face, there maybe is a deeper challenge, the challenge that Liz referred to, the challenge of imagination. And that somehow we need to find a way to recharge our relationship to the natural world with the kind of compassion that Liz mentioned at the outset. And I love that as a framing for the whole conference, this idea of compassion. And if we're going to recharge the relationship with a kind of emotional, spiritual relationship that many of us feel to the natural world, with a kind of reverence and awe that many of us experience in different natural settings that we relate to, we need to listen to other voices beyond just the scientific voices that include the humanities and the arts, that include indigenous traditions and faith traditions, and have them help us find a way to a somewhat different trajectory, a different relationship to the natural world. And I think that's going to be actually fairly fundamental. So we're very, very lucky and feel very, very honored to have Elder Paulette here. I'm going to ask Susan Chatwood to come up to make an introduction. Susan is the director of the Circumpolar Institute for Health Research and a member through that institute of the Planetary Health Alliance and a very important representative for the Arctic region. So Susan, thank you for being here.
Good morning. It's my pleasure to welcome and introduce Elder Francois Paulette. He's the Dene Solene member and member of the Smith's Landing Treaty 8 Nation. Francois Paulette survived the residential school system before going on to become the youngest chief in the Northwest Territories Indian Brotherhood in 1971. In 1972, along with 16 other chiefs from the Mackenzie Valley, he challenged the Crown to recognize treaty and Aboriginal rights and title over 450,000 square miles of land in the historic Paulette case. He remains a passionate and outspoken advocate of treaty and Aboriginal rights in all matters affecting his people and is recognized in the courts as an expert witness on historic treaties. As chief negotiator for the Smith Landing First Nation, he worked diligently to conclude a treaty settlement agreement, which has proven to be of critical importance in protecting the Slave River from hydroelectric development. He continues to serve as an advisor to Little Dene First Nation on the proposed creation of the Tai-Dene Nene National Park. Francois takes pride in maintaining his Dene language and the traditional knowledge that derives from his close relationship with the land. He was a founding member and chairman of the Dene Cultural Institute and continues to serve as an interpreter of traditional knowledge and a facilitator of cross-cultural understanding. As a collaborator on a number of Canadian and international documentary films, He has helped to increase public understanding of the Dene way of life, Dene Chanye, and has participated in forums including the Parliament of World Religions to promote understanding of the spiritual world of the Dene. Francois continues to involve himself in efforts to protect the national environment of Denende. He has chaired and contributed to numerous water conferences, and he has been a collaborator on several documentary films focusing on the impact of the tar sands on the environment and peoples of northern Canada. His work has taken him to the far corners of the world, but central to his well-being is his life on the land of the Dene Selene. Welcome, Paul.
Salotine. Greetings. I just want to first say that this building here is impressive. Where I come from in my homeland, we refer to the English people as Thotine. Thotine. You translate that, it means stone people, because you build your homes out of stone. So we recognize you in that way. I just want to say that I'm going to talk about a way of life that's ancient. In my language, we refer to this civilization as Denechania. Denechania. It's incomprehensive. It's of who we are as a people, spiritually, emotionally, mentally, and physically. I want to also say that I have 5 handsome boys, 2 beautiful young ladies, and a wife that is a Mohawk, and she's a midwife. And we deliver our children at home and also at the hospital. I am a servant to the people, but more so, I'm a servant to Mother Earth, and I'm also a protector of Mother Earth. But I'm also a servant to woman. Because I come from a matrix system, woman is central to our way of life. We hold woman in high esteem like we hold Mother Earth. Mother Earth is everything that we live by and we live for. It's important that we continue to keep the sacred teachings. I'm a sacred knowledge holder and a sacred keeper of the knowledge of the teachings, the 7 teachings of our people. Love, respect, honesty, courage, humility. Humility. For most of you men here, you have a tough time with that. Correct? Well, just say, yes, I have a problem with that. Don't be shy. wisdom, and truth. This Denechania I speak of is everything that how we live on the land. I must say also that I never lived in a city. I do not know how it is to live in the city. My home is close to, my back door is the second largest national park, Wood Buffalo National Park. There's a great river that flows by us. This river is central to it's our life stream to how we live. I am very fortunate to be living amongst the buffalo. All of my life I knew the habitat of buffalo, the most sacred of the four-leggeds. Across the other side of the river is the caribou. And we have many species of fish in the river, 21 to count the numbers. But there is something happening, something immensely, that is changing the very fabric of our existence as Dene people, as First Nations people. There is something stirring in our climate. And it's not by the hands of the Dene people. We know that. And in Canada, we work with Catherine McKenna, the Minister of Climate Change. The Government of Canada is beginning to embrace traditional knowledge as a way out of how to confront and work with climate change. I've been involved with the Paris Agreement, the 6 articles of the Paris Agreement. I've been to every COP climate change talks for the last 9 years. But there is lots of talk, but very little action. This is where you and traditional people, we can work together to make the changes in the will that we have to impact the governments, to change their thinking. Where I live, we are impacted by the tar sands. The last time a young lady came here and talked about it. Just before coming here, we stopped in Calgary and I picked up a newspaper there, the Calgary Herald. And in the front page was this caption. This said, Alberta. In bitumen we trust. I couldn't believe it. If you understand what bitumen is, the tar sands, it's affecting our river systems, the air. I talked about the four-leggeds, the buffaloes, the caribou, they're all dwindling. They're getting small in numbers. The river, we cannot drink the water from the river anymore. I have to carry fresh drinking water with me when I travel the river. It's as simple as that. We've never known that. There is now a proposal by industry to have another tar sands mine just 30 kilometers from the Wood Buffalo National Park. From a World Heritage Site, UNESCO. We have a lot of problem with that. Because as you know, Canada, tar sands produces a third of the green gas emissions in Canada. We cannot afford any more bitumen mines. Canada cannot afford to do that. If they're going to keep to the Paris Agreement, my friends, we are in a climate crisis. We have a huge problem. This climate change is out of control. The government are minimizing what they are seeing in a newspaper. It is our responsibility as humans to protect the earth, the waters, everything that sustained us for thousands of years. We can no longer make things just say nothing about it. There is a crisis, my friend. You need to campaign, you need to lobby your governments to elevate the consciousness of governments that there is a crisis. It's a problem. Where I live, we see it every day. Where you live here, you don't see the changes in the stones and the rocks. Everything remains the same. But where I live, every day I step outside of my home, I see changes. There's been a prophecy that was said many years ago that four-legged birds, they are beginning to move north. There are moose that are seen in the Arctic Ocean, in the coast. The Inuits last year have taken 7 moose in the copper mine area in the river. That's unknown. But for Dene people, we try to see why this is happening. We want to understand why the animals, the birds are moving north. And it's for a reason. You people that travel, that live in earthquake places, they say that these little lizards can feel an earthquake coming on. So they go to high ground. In the same way, these four-legged, the birds, animals, are moving north. They are moving away from something that is about to happen. And it's very difficult for the people that are closest to the land. We no longer just have to just be thinking. I am a spiritual human being. My whole life is I'm connected to the land. Everything is alive around us. Everything has a spirit. They have feelings, they have a heart, they have a mind, they have a body. The water. We need to reconnect our spirit to Mother Earth. We need to embrace this ancient knowledge that we hold of understanding our relationship and our responsibility that we have to Mother Earth. We can work together. I am prepared to come to your communities and bring back this spiritual identity connection to the earth. We need to begin to conduct ceremonies. I cannot tell you how important that is. In Canada, they say reconciliation, to reconcile with First Nations. That's fine. But more so, we need to reconcile with Mother Earth. We have abused the earth. When I was a young man growing up, a question was asked of an elder, "What is sin?" This elder very quickly responded, "Sin. The biggest sin that man can do is to abuse Mother Earth." So when I look at that, we need to change our spiritual identity. We need to provide ourselves with spiritual fuel so we can see the earth not just as something physical, but it has a spirit. We need to restore her. We need to help her. A giant mine in Yellowknife, where Susan and his son live, they have arsenic in the ground, in the mines, stored in the ground, arsenic. They say that there's enough arsenic to annihilate all human race in the world in that ground. That's a scientific fact that I'm providing. How do we clean that up? Because of this crisis, as I said, Government of Canada has turned to us for assistance. I work with a group of elders and bringing together the policy and protocols of how to work with the government on climate change. We need to do research. Why are there so many people dying along the river by cancer? I was the chair of the Elders' Council at the Stanton Territorial Hospital. And there's a lot of people coming in with cancer. And the question is asked, where is this cancer coming from? And the elders are asking for that. Answers. We asked the doctors. The doctors came back to us. Nationally in Canada, stomach cancer is the third highest. But for some reason or another, in the Northwest Territories along the river route, stomach cancer is the highest. Next question, why is that? We need to have research, we need to have good database. And this is where we can work together. Talking about medicines. We are concerned about food security in the North, health of our people, not just spiritual health, because our medicines that are on the ground are being impacted by pollution. We need to work on how to restore these traditional medicines. And I'm proud to say that I belong to the Arctic Indigenous Healing Foundation, where we're beginning to come back to how to heal and work with our people in a traditional form. I stand before you with this medicine. It's sweetgrass. We pray with it. It nurtures me spiritually. So I want to say, my friends, that you have the resources. You are doctors. You can voice and impact your governments, that they no longer have to, they need to elevate the status of climate change that is now a crisis. And we need to do something more than just talking at the Paris Agreement. We need to do more. And with that, as humans, we have hope for our children and our grandchildren, so they can see that the world around them they can go out and breathe easily. So we can reconnect every time we go out and speak to the trees, to the water, that we want to restore their way of life, their connection to us as we are connected to her. My time is short here, correct? And it's up. My friends, I really want to thank you. It's been an honor to come here, a big honor to come here and give you and provide a message. I'm a messenger from where I am, from where I live, that we need to now elevate global warming, climate crisis. We can no longer say climate change. It's a crisis. So with that, thank you so much. It's an honor. Masi Cho.
Thank you so much. That was inspiring, and you gave us the tone, the heart of the conference as we go forward. We really appreciate that knowledge. I'm going to introduce a different speaker, a different set of ideas that actually will come together with what Elder Francois has spoken about. But just before I do, I want to make mention of my colleague here, Wendy. Wendy, you'll see moving around. Wendy's the host of the conference with us today and the next few days. And Wendy's also going to be introducing the Children's Parliament and doing various things. I wanted you to say.
Would that be all right?
Yes, if you want, yeah.
Thank you. Just as we transition, I wasn't due to speak at this point, but I feel as your host, I'd like us to pause at this point, because I think we have heard a beautiful and deep and profoundly challenging invitation. And one of the things that Francois said was, my whole being is connected to the land. And we could put in the sea and the air. And one of the practices I do, I've learned from folk who are called Capacitar International, and they draw together practices from communities across the world that help us remember that. And so if you're willing, for just a moment, put your hands on your belly. Put down what you've got in your hands and just put your hands on your belly. Feel yourself breathe. And at the start of one of the practices I do, we sway a little bit. I won't get you to stand and sway, but you might want to later. And you might want to close your eyes. And just remember, this is my home for life. And that's my home in my body, my home, this planet. This is my home for life. Right, thank you. I'll pass back over to Liz.
Thank you, Wendy. Throughout the conference, you will have these moments where we can really connect to each other and connect to ourselves. Hannah, can I ask you to come forward? Hannah is one of the most amazing PhD students I've come across. She's now graduated, or she did her PhD in a remarkable time, produced 6 amazing papers, going to Nature at the minute in review. She's somebody who understands that data can help us bring about change. So Hannah, thank you for being here.
Thank you, and thank you very much for having me. It's very humbling to be standing up here and a little bit daunting. The last time I was in here, I was graduating, and I was kind of worried today that I was going to be the youngest on the panel, but then the cool kids showed up. So I feel a little bit better about that. So I'm Hannah Ritchie, and basically what I do is data, and data in terms of environmental change, but how it also links with human well-being and global change. And I hope that looking through long-term data, we can kind of get a somewhat unique perspective, but also as a kind of young researcher, I can also perhaps bring you a kind of unique perspective on how my views around this have changed throughout my university time at university and into research. So kind of just a brief outline of what I want to cover. I really want to focus on this talk on this polarization we have currently, where I think we have this one worldview where it's humanity versus environment, where we only talk about humanity in terms of how we negatively or degrade our environment. The opposite and flip side of that, you have some people will have this impression that they only need to pay attention to the environment in terms of how it impacts on humanity. And bringing that together, I think that's really where we kind of stand in this planetary health sphere, which I'm really excited about, is how can we bring these two worldviews together and create a kind of sustainable future that also enhances human well-being. And then I'll kind of briefly go over some signs of progress and also some signs of concern. So who am I? So I work for an organization called Our World in Data. .org. We are based at the Oxford Martin School at the University of Oxford and primarily funded through the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation. And this is our team here. We produce an online web publication where we take global data, build these interactive data visualizations to give a really long-term view of how the world's changing. And as you can see there, my colleague, so Max Rosser is the project director, and then Esteban, they're both economists. So we're in that weird position where economists and environmental researchers are working together, and somehow it works. But this really creates this kind of almost new worldview where we've got these kind of what people would regard as conflicting views, but we can kind of pass the environmental view through the lens of economics, but also the lens of economics and challenge environmental views. And then we also have the kind of web developer. So this is our publication. You can go on there. Today I'll primarily present global data, but on there you can find national, regional data for all the trends. And we also built this SDG tracker where you can track all of the data on how we're doing for all of the many indicators towards the Sustainable Development Goals. So I wanted to kind of go a bit into my background and how this ties into this effect of humanity versus environment. So I did all of my education at the University of Edinburgh, but I started with a 4-year degree in environmental geoscience. So I came to university at 16 with a keen passion for the environment. I can't remember a time in my life where environment was not at the forefront of what I was thinking about. When I was 11, I was giving class presentations at school on climate change, so you can imagine I was the cool, popular kid at school. But it's been a constant in my life through them. So I did a degree in environmental geoscience, and really this was the worldview that I saw. So when we look at long-term trends in population, you see this effect where you see almost kind of constant population, and then in a very short period of time, we've seen a really rapid increase in global population. When we zoom in and look at it from 1820, again, you see this you get the impression that population will never stop. We are increasing at unsustainable levels. 1950 we had 2 billion, we're now at 7 billion, and that trend looks like it will never end. Again, when we look at carbon dioxide emissions, we see this kind of classic, all of the trends that I'll present, you almost see this kind of classic hockey stick model where we see very low levels throughout most of human history and this really rapid ramp up of carbon dioxide emissions. Again, we see that in carbon dioxide concentrations. So pre-industrial, we were at 280 ppm. We're now well on our way up above 400 ppm. And again, when we look at that's also reflected in our temperature change, where since pre-industrial, we're approximately 1 degree above pre-industrial, and we expect that to continue 1.5 to, we're currently on course, if we meet our Paris obligations, to at least 3 degrees by 2100. Reflected in energy, for most of human history, energy, we used traditional biofuels, and our overall energy consumption was very low. We've seen this really rapid rise, primarily in fossil fuels. Our renewable energy technologies are still very small relative to our fossil fuel consumption. Cropland, growing population that we need to feed. Again, we see this really rapid ramp up over time. Global freshwater, same story. Looks like I had this impression there was water crises everywhere in the world. Growing population, freshwater would just increase and increase and increase until we reached major crisis point. And then biodiversity. So when you look at the Global Living Planet Index, which is indexed to 1970, overall we see population species numbers have declined by around 60% since 1970. So this was my worldview at university. By the end of 4 years, I was just drowning in the world that we were creating, the world we were headed for. And to be honest, I was angry, I was frustrated. I felt like the world would never change, the world could never change. And the problem, and when I seen all of these environmental changes, throughout my degree program, humanity was only ever mentioned in the lens of what we were doing to the environment. I never learned anything about how human well-being was changing. And at that time, I was very ignorant. So I extrapolated these trends and I assumed, oh, global poverty must be rising. Global inequality must be rising. There's no way that food production could keep up with population. And that was I seen news reports everywhere on natural disasters. More people than ever were dying from natural disasters. And that was my lens and my view at the time. And I was really demotivated. I felt like the world could never change. The world would never change. And then I was introduced to this guy. So if you've never seen this guy, this is Hans Rosling. Unfortunately, he's one of my idols, and unfortunately he passed away last year. But what he does is you can find him on a load of TED Talks and on YouTube. What he does is he tries to explain how the world's changing through data. So he set up this foundation called the Gapminder Foundation, and basically what he does is he uses the interactive data visualizations to make statistics fun for people and show them how the world is changing. And what he does is, and he does it in this really unique way that only an old Swedish man can, is that he basically shows that everyone is very ignorant about how the world has changed, but you almost love him for pointing out how ignorant you are. So I was introduced to him, and when I saw that all he talked about, my worldview just flipped completely, because I hadn't been taking into consideration how human well-being is changing. Which brings me to this kind of other lens that people can see the world through, primarily economists, that the only role of environment and all we care about is how it impacts on humanity. So if you look at how the world has changed from a human lens and look only at human well-being, then these are primarily the trends that we see, and I'll go into some of them in more detail. But as you can see, nearly every indicator is getting better and has been getting better very rapidly over the last couple of centuries. So when you look at the percentage of the world living in extreme poverty, in 1820, nearly everyone lived in extreme poverty. Today, that's 10%, which is of course too much, but we've seen this really rapid progress. So for every day for the last 15 years, you could have had the headline 137,000 people have escaped extreme poverty today, which is just a message that never comes across. So when Hans Rosling, when you poll people, so in the US, only 5% of the population could tell you that extreme poverty was falling. In the UK, only 9% could tell you that extreme poverty was falling. Everyone primarily thinks that it's increasing when we've seen this really dramatic decline. Child mortality, so in 1900, every third child in the world died before reaching their 5th birthday. In 1900. In 1950, that was 1 in 4. Today, that's 1 in 20, which is, of course, still far too much. 6 million children die every year. But again, we've seen this really rapid decline. life expectancy. So in 1950, life expectancy was 45 years. Today, it's 72 years. Again, we've seen this rapid increase. Share of the population that's undernourished. I assumed that there was no way that food production could keep up with global population. We've seen a decline since 1990 from around 19% to around 10%, which is of course still too much, and we have progress to make. But again, there is a downward trend. The share of, when talking about global health, the share of 1-year-olds that are vaccinated, when you ask people what share of the world population do you think are vaccinated, most people say 20, 30%, when in fact 85 to 90% of the world's children are vaccinated. Share of illiterate population, back in 1800, almost no one could read and write. Today, the majority of the world's population can read and write. And again, in terms of basic education, when you go back to the 1800s, almost no one. Today, 85 to 90%. So these are the kind of two kind of almost polarized and conflicting worldviews that I've seen. So I grew up with this worldview of everything's getting worse, things will never change. You've got this flip side, which is also skewed in thinking everything's getting better, we'll just carry on as usual. And I think the role of the planetary health sphere is to somehow bring these two worldviews together to see how can we continue this progress and also acknowledge the progress that we've made, but do it in a much more sustainable way that takes us away from these environmental crises that we're headed for. So this is why I think these two conflicting worldviews are incomplete on their own. So if you look at global change in terms of environmental factors since 1965, so this is indexed to 100, so 200 is doubled, 300 is tripled. Again, you just see this rapid rise. And this was the worldview that I saw. I just saw this never-ending increase that was basically headed for environmental disaster. And the problem with this was that when I saw, and your basic instinct when you see this is, so how do we change this? The basic instinct is to say, let's go back. Let's go back to 1965 when our energy was much more sustainable, or our water was much more sustainable. But the problem with that worldview is, back in 1965, every fourth child in the world died. The majority of the world population were living in extreme poverty. We don't want to go back, we want to move forward. And then you've got the flip side where you only see changes in human well-being. The problem with this worldview is when you see this, you look at it and think everything's getting better, we're headed in the right direction, why not let's just continue doing this? Like, it's working, let's just carry on business as usual. But as everyone in the room knows, if we carry on business as usual, we will hit, and we are coming close to environmental crises. So we know we can't continue business as usual, and that is why we need both of these views to come together. So not move back, but move forward in a way that's not business as usual, that's not moving forward with the unsustainable practices that we have in the past. And so I just wanted to quickly flick through some of the kind of signs of progress and cases for optimism. So I had a look at some of the program for this conference and trying to cover some of those. Obviously, I can't get through them all, but hopefully you can find them at our publication. So this question of population, I had this impression population will never end. It will just continue. Women will just continue having five children each. We've reached this unsustainable population. When we look at this, we see that the world has reached peak child. There will never be a time where there will be more children in the world than there are today. And that peak of peak child anticipates peak population. So essentially, we are moving to the stage where population growth will level out. And again, we see this in children per woman. So in 1950, the average woman would have 5 children. We're now closing in on 2 children. When we look at solar PV prices, which will be key in challenging fossil fuels, from a market perspective, we've seen a 100-fold fall in the price of solar PV since the 1970s. This graphic, I usually use this to shock people into how much land we use for livestock. So when we look at the amount of land that we use for cities, built up area, it's actually only 1% of global land. When we look at livestock, it's 27%, which is the entire continent of the Americas. And I usually kind of shock people by showing this image, but I also think this is a case for optimism. We are seeing rapid shifts in dietary habits, attitudes to food, new technologies. If we can tackle this livestock issue, look how much land we could free up to restore forests, to restore back to nature, increase biodiversity. Death from natural disasters. So I always assumed that deaths from natural disasters must be rising because I was suddenly just acutely aware of all the headlines. As we see over the last century, as a baseline, there's been a really quite significant decline in natural disasters. These spikes that still remain are mainly earthquakes and tsunamis. And that's not to say that moving into the future, there will be no issues with natural disasters, not at all. With a changing climate, we will have to adapt, but that puts a lot of emphasis on adaptation as well as mitigation. A couple of signs of concern. So from a dietary perspective, we see this rapid rise in obesity. Across all countries in the world, not just high-income countries. This also feeds into diabetes. So some countries in the world, every 4th or 5th person now has diabetes. This is reflected in what people die from. So the dominant causes that people die from now are non-communicable diseases. So cardiovascular disease, cancer, diabetes, etc. And again, that's reflected in risk factors. So most of our risk factors are now dietary related or smoking related, which gives us is a rising cause for concern, but also gives us hope that these are things that we can address. And then again, this is reflected in deaths from air pollution, which are rising globally, above 4 million for outdoor air pollution, and when you combine with indoor air pollution, it's above 7 million. And then finally, fresh water is of course going to be a very pressing issue in the decades to come, which is obviously a sign for concern, but considering 70% of our water is related to agriculture, if we can adapt our food systems, then there is hope that we can tackle this issue. So just to conclude, I think the key message for what planetary health for the 21st century means is developing a new balance between human well-being and environment that takes these two polarized views and somehow brings them together. And I hope that comes through in many of the presentations that I'm really looking forward to seeing. So thank you very much for your time.
Thank you so much, Hannah. If I picked her up right, did she say that there are never more children in the world, there will never be more children in the world than there are today? Is that correct? Well then, folks, we are delighted that we get to welcome two of that incredible population today as part of our plenary keynotes. We are so proud to have the Children's Parliament with us. The Children's Parliament are in Scotland, and Anna and Alexander and Chelsea will be speaking with us. They will introduce themselves, and they're going to choose to remain seated. And they've got some questions that they would like to offer us as we go through this journey together. So I'll hand over to Chelsea.
Hi, everyone. A big thank you to Liz and her team for inviting us along today. We're really pleased to be here with you. I have the privilege of being the Children's Voices Program Manager at Children's Parliament, and I'm just going to do a brief introduction to who we are as an organisation, and then I'm going to hand over to the children. Children's Parliament is Scotland's Centre of Excellence for children's participation and engagement, and so we work with children across Scotland from the early years, 3-4 years old, up to 14, to ensure that their voices are heard when decisions are being made that impact upon their lives. We want to create opportunities for adults who are making decisions to hear directly from children about their views and experiences of their lives. So we speak to children about their experiences and ideas about life at home, in school, in their community, communities, but we also want them to think about what kind of Scotland they want to live in and what kind of world they want to live in. So today and tomorrow we'll be along for children from the Children's Parliament to share some work that they've been doing with you, and hopefully some of their ideas will inspire you as you continue on with your work. So I'm going to hand over now to these members of the Children's Parliament, and they're going to tell you about what they've been doing with us.
Morning, my name's Anna. I'm a member of the Children's Parliament who's 12 years old. And I'm Alexander, and I'm a member of Children's Parliament and I'm 12 years old too. We've been members of the Children's Parliament for 2 years. We're currently working on a project for children's human rights defenders. Our Commissioner, Bruce Adamson, is helping us. To start off our project, we went to 5 different schools and did workshops with younger children about rights of a child. The rights of a child are important because without them we wouldn't be happy, healthy or safe. Later on this year we'll be going to the UN back in Geneva for the Day of General Discussion to defend rights that need defended.
The reason we are here is because we took part in a project called Streets Ahead Trinent. It was talking about the past, present and future of our hometown, Trinent. We made a mural showing all the children's ideas of the surrounding areas and put it on a big mural. We shared the mural with some adults that make decisions around Trinent, and then we took it round our tour of Dynamic Earth, the galas and the schools. Then we went to the UN for the Day of General Discussion, and the UN discussion was on children's rights and the environment. We are now going to show you a film of us in Geneva.
Welcome to Geneva! I'm Hannah.
And I'm Anna.
And we are the Children's Parliament. And we're here with children from East Lothian who are members of Scotland's Children's Parliament.
We're here as part of an international project called Under the Same Sky, where children from Mozambique, Brazil, Palestine, Zimbabwe, Scotland and Australia explored their experiences of the places they are growing up.
Urban planning, conservation and sustainability. 16 of us were chosen to make this mural.
And we are here to take part in the United Nations Committee on the Rights of a Child's Day of General Discussion, which this year is focusing on children's rights and the environment.
And how can children's ideas be included more?
We did this mural about the history and future of Trinent, and we've come here to share our ideas about what we think is important about where we grow up.
The huge 6-panel mural took about a week to create and covers the history of Trinent from way back in medieval time to our suggestions for the future of Trinent. We've already shared our ideas with adults in East Lothian through presentations for the public and council officials and politicians, as well as touring the mural around the local galas.
The mural has already featured at the National World Town Leadership Conference.
And everyone's just really excited about going to Geneva for the 22nd of September. Let's go Children's Parliament.
And now it's the turn of the UN to hear about our ideas.
In Trinent, with her, she has this barrel and she banged on it.
Around the world ask questions to the adults at the Day of General Discussion about the environment. We've sent an email link of the video of the Under the Same Sky project. We want to ask you what you think about these questions. Mozambique. In our residential areas, we don't have places to play safely. What can governments and the UN do to restore our safe places to play, places that nurture our talents so that we don't have to play in dangerous places?
Brazil. I like Sao Paulo, but I wish there were more parks and grass and less cars. People don't always respect each other and only think about themselves. I would like to change that. What would you like to change about where you live?
The situation of conflict in which we live causes many problems. Being afraid of being outside, lack of water to grow plants with to make green grass and soft grass. Not being able to enjoy the natural environment outside of the camp. What will be done to protect our right to play in a healthy environment like many other children in the world can do?
Zimbabwe. An erratic supply of water for domestic use within our community creates an environment that infringes upon various children's rights and sometimes exposes us to abuse. How can this be addressed to free children from such an environment?
Scotland. In the future, global warming is really going to affect us. Why don't we have more green energy and other things to protect our environment, and how can our ideas be included?
Australia. How can children get their voices heard in their communities to help adults understand their rights? And how can they influence the decisions making at the global level?
Thank you for listening.
So, a great rounding to this plenary conversation. You will have noticed the spread of ages that we've had, the spread of challenges and insights that people have brought us. And we're going to now switch gear and go into a panel that others will introduce. But before we do that, I just want to invite you to take a moment to bring to mind a child that you care about, somebody who is under 10. So someone who will be, 25 or under in 15 years' time. And I'd like you to think of this child as your elder through this event. What would they be wanting you to focus on, talk about in terms of their future? But also in terms of today. One of the beautiful quotes that I read from some of the Children's Parliament materials and one of the MCPs was a child who said, we're not just citizens of tomorrow, we are citizens of today as well. And I think that's the same for all of us. So I'm going to now hand over to others who will introduce the panel, and there'll be a bit of swapping. If you want to just stand while there's panel swapping, go ahead. But if I can invite the next panel to come up to the stage. Thanks so much. We're not having an official break, just a little swap.
Don't leave the building.
All right, everyone, we're going to get started right into the panel. So if you can bear with us for a few more minutes, we'll have a formal break as soon as the panel concludes. Jonathan, Andy, Peter, can we get Robin, Anna? There we all are. Hi. Tell us to stop. I mean, it's going to be a conversation. So. Okay, so 11:15, is that what you're saying? Okay. All right, let's have everybody sit down. We're aware that we're running a little bit late. We are going to have a coffee break. It will be at 11:15, and we're going to shave a little bit of time off of our panel. So if folks could please take your seats, we will get started. Let's see, do we have... So rather than spend time right now, since we're cutting back on the time as much as we can, I'm going to have the panelists introduce themselves as they begin their comments. Liz had asked me to provide a few minutes of broader framing around planetary health before we start that conversation, and so let me try to start there. As I mentioned at the outset, the planetary health community has been growing very, very rapidly. The field has been growing rapidly, and the Planetary Health Alliance has been growing. And all of that growth is not, in fact, because we are so charismatic, as my wife reminds me too frequently, but in fact is because I think the world is slowly waking up to the moment that we are in. It is an extraordinary moment, I think a unique moment in human history, and I think we are really only just beginning to catch up to its deep significance, only just now beginning to comprehend what Martin Luther King described as the fierce urgency of now. As all of you know, most of the history of human civilization has taken place during the Holocene, this geological epoch characterized by extraordinarily stable biophysical conditions. And about the same time that our Apollo astronauts were bringing home these sort of iconic images of Earth from space, we were entering a new geological epoch, the Anthropocene, in which human activity has become the dominant force shaping our planet's biophysical conditions. And we are transforming and disrupting those natural systems at by far the fastest rates in the history of our species. We are now find ourselves in what Stefan and his colleagues have called the Great Acceleration. Hannah beautifully described much of that in her previous comments, but it is our collective activities that are transforming nature, and our impacts are intensifying nearly exponentially. So just to recoup very quickly what Hannah was saying, these are graphs of global consumption patterns over time, and what you see is whether we're talking about appropriation of fresh water or proliferation of motor vehicles or primary energy consumption, the production of paper or plastics, that you see very similar patterns with relatively modest consumption patterns before 1950, and then this very, very steep acceleration up to and through today. And not surprisingly, when you look at impacts across our natural systems, you see very similar curves, whether you're looking at biodiversity loss or exploitation of fisheries or addition of CO2 to the atmosphere, deforestation, etc. Just thinking about the past year since our last annual meeting. In October, a world-renowned group of scientists published the Lancet Commission report on pollution and health. Phil Landrigan will be speaking more about that later in the conference. And they calculated that our own waste, distributed through air and water and soil, is now killing roughly 9 million of us annually. A few weeks after that report, another study came out of Germany showing that across 63 protected areas, the total biomass of all flying insects had fallen by 76% in only the past 27 years. A couple of months after that, a sperm whale washed up on a beach in Spain, and scientists who were wondering what could have killed such an awesome and enormous creature performed an autopsy. They found that its digestive system was clogged with 64 pounds of plastic garbage. This, I think, is the urgency of now. Another way to think about this is the schematic that we've developed for planetary health, that human activity as a result of the curves that Hannah was showing us, as a result of steep growth in human population and even steeper increases in per capita production, is now fundamentally surpassing our planet's capacity to absorb our waste or to provide the resources that we're using in a sustainable way. And as a result, we're transforming so many of our broad, large natural systems. We're seeing global pollution, biodiversity loss, changes in biogeochemical cycles, changes in land use and land cover, resource scarcity, disruption of the climate system, and that these large anthropogenic environmental changes are interacting with each other in complex ways that we're just beginning to understand to affect the fundamental preconditions for health and well-being. And the field of planetary health is starting to understand and to characterize the burdens of disease associated with this vast and accelerating transformation. So this is the moment that we're in. And there's so much that we can do, so much that every single one of you here can bring to this set of challenges. And we've heard little bits and pieces of that already, from thoughtful design of the world's cities to minimize our ecological footprints and optimize health and well-being, to providing access to family planning for those who don't have it. From rethinking our energy systems to sustainable intensification of our agriculture system, from planting hedgerows for global pollinators to more conservative management of our world's fisheries, from dietary change to cleaner technologies to reducing food waste. So across really every sector of human activity, there are many, many, many opportunities to tackle the challenges that we're facing, and all of you here are now at the leading edge of that change. So this is the urgency of this moment, I think. It's the convergence of those curves that Hannah was showing us. And in the context of that urgency, we wanted to explore in this first panel that we're having some of the relationships between different but related frameworks for thinking about these challenges. Planetary health is sort of the new kid on the block. We owe enormous intellectual debts to many other frameworks and fields that have come before us, including conservation medicine, eco-health, One Health, the growing field of climate change and health. And we thought it would be interesting to bring together some of the representatives from some of these other frameworks, or people that are deeply familiar with these other frameworks, to discuss some of their origins, their similarities, their differences, and ultimately how we can come together as a community to address some of the urgent challenges that we face. And so I was hoping that we could sort of go down the line, maybe starting with Jonathan, and just share as a start a little bit about the framework that you've sort of been associated with, that you are most comfortable with, a little bit about its origins and histories, and what you can tell us about its accomplishments and its greatest challenges.
Sam, thank you very much. I'm Jonathan Patz, professor from the University of Wisconsin in Madison in the United States. I was going to start off by talking about deep interlinkages from a kayaking trip with Sam on the shallow Potomac River, but I had a more inspirational thing happen to me, well, at least equal and inspiring me, when I yesterday was with this university's chancellery hiking on the John Muir Trail, which is just 30 minutes east of here. And I want to say that, to put it simply, it all starts right here, because the birthplace of John Muir, the famous naturalist, is in Dunbar, just east of here. And I view everything that we're talking about and all the frameworks as coming back to John Muir when he said, when you pull on any one thing, you find it connected to everything in the universe. And it's similar to what Elder Francois Paulette said this morning before us. And following John Muir was Aldo Leopold, another naturalist, this one actually born in America, not moving to America, and he talked about the land ethic. When you see a sick individual, when you see a sick animal, look to the land upon which that animal depends, or the plant depends. And so everything that we are talking about here is about interdependence, interconnectedness. Liz Grant talked about compassion, and that combination of compassion and interdependence. I think His Holiness the Dalai Lama would like that concept as well. So I'll just end by saying, to me, when you start with conservation medicine, which is mostly taught in the vet schools, which expanded up to One Health, healthy people, healthy animals, healthy environment, to concepts of ecosystem health, which is really a systems-based approach, never looking at things in segmented ways, looking at the interconnections and taking a systems approach, to EcoHealth and the International Association for Ecology and Health, and planetary health, which is all of that, but with a scale of urgency, reminding us not to be rearranging the furniture on the deck of the Titanic when the ship is going down. So to me, it all comes back to John Muir and the interconnectedness, and so this meeting at this place is that much more significant. Thank you.
Why don't we just go down the table? Well, good morning, everybody. My name is Peter Musofe. I am from the University of Dodoma in Tanzania. I am a professor in veterinary medicine, specializing in poultry health and production. Now, being here is a great honor because south where I come from, while we talk about things of how nature and people and animals are connected, in theory, up north, it's really practical down south because we really live in the midst of nature, animals, and people. Tanzania as a country has adopted a One Health framework, and it's a One Health framework which is looking more of animals, including wild animals, which you have a plentiful, human and domestic animals. So I was looking at it that this year, for example, the Prime Minister's office, which is in charge of One Health platform, inaugurated a policy. And in 2015, a strategic plan for 5 years, strategic plan was put in place. But looking at it, it showed that there is a lot of emphasis on the three that I mentioned: the wildlife, the domestic animals, and the humans. So the element of the environment and the element of the nature where all these three are found is a little bit diminished. So when we talk about planetary health with a view of Mother Earth and the dwellers of Mother Earth, I feel that this is a more complete way of looking at how health can be impacted in general. So it's really a pleasure to be part of planetary health, which can actually inform on other frameworks which started, meaning that something is happening. So instead of starting to create the wheel, we're just going to add one leg or two to ensure that this train moves forward. Thank you.
Good morning. My name is Robin, and people who know me know that I normally introduce myself as a sheep farmer. So I really am a sheep farmer. I do have sheep that are battling dry conditions at home in Australia right now. I was privileged to be trained as a veterinarian, and I'm currently Professor of Food and Nutrition Security at the University of Sydney. So we have a range of frameworks that we're meant to discuss today, and I suspect that for each of you, really it's not so much about the name, it's actually about doing something. And so the original One Health, as it was conceived, was very much about, I think, where planetary health is right now. We went through a time of pandemics such as avian influenza, where the focus for One Health, it tended to be aligned with infectious disease. And because of the urgency of that situation, there wasn't really time to go back and reflect on the drivers. How had we got to this situation where we have an amazing emergence of a virus that kills its host within 2 days? Very poorly adapted virus. But it's our modern production systems that allowed that virus to survive. I've used the term eco-health, and I really liked eco-health because it was the first term where the social sciences issues such as gender were intimately associated and openly discussed. Coming to planetary health, what I like about it, not only that it does give an umbrella under which all of our concerns seem to fit, but there's a recognition that we need to understand also how we got here. So at Sydney last year, we had a workshop on history and planetary health, and we also are looking at ethics and planetary health. And I think while things are urgent, we do need to act. I think we understand that in order to make wise choices, we do need to understand how we got here. And I think issues of inequity, be it in terms of the way we position ourselves in relation to the natural environment, or we as humans, the inequity we find within our own societies in relation to how we treat people who are different to ourselves, even in relation to the fact that as a species, the sexual dimorphism between men and women is more exaggerated since we moved to sedentary agriculture. So this was a shocking finding for me last year, that to understand that when we were hunter-gatherers, men and women, that the height difference was less than it is today. We have moved to agriculture. We've moved to diets that seem to work okay for men but are not working as well for women, and yet we think this is normal. So while we do need to move forward and to act quickly, we really need to reflect how it is we got to where we are today. And I really look forward to the next couple of days to exploring all of this with you. Thank you.
Thank you. My name's Anna Meredith, and I'm a Professor of Conservation Medicine here at the University of Edinburgh. And I'd just like to really follow on from what's already been said. You stole a bit of my thunder about John Muir, because I was also going to mention John Muir. I suppose, and I'm also pleased to see several fellow vets up here. My interest working in conservation medicine is really those complex relationships at the interface of animal health and human health and ecosystem health, and really being part of an interdisciplinary approach to tackling these complex issues, and particularly the role that vets and animal health can play as part of these teams working to conserve biodiversity. So for me, my lens is always that the conservation of biodiversity is at the center of things, and everything that we've learnt about already today emanates from that, especially emanating from what we were told earlier this morning about the closeness to our environment. So I think the achievements of these various frameworks have been many. We're all coming along in what's been quite a rapid progression. And yes, we are probably more prepared now for pandemics of disease as a result of things like the One Health framework. And we know a bit more about the importance of surveillance. But to me, I see the challenge is that we talk a lot about these frameworks, and the words One Health appear in publications. We're talking now about planetary health, and there's a lot of advocacy and support for that. But I don't think there's enough guidance on the implementation of how we actually bring that about. We're told to work in interdisciplinary teams, and there's this so-called interdisciplinarity bandwagon, but I think we need more guidance of how we actually do that. Because I think we're all in this room converts to that, we all want to, and there's very much a bottom-up interdisciplinarity, but we need to learn more about that. So that's what I see as one of the main challenges, to make sure that this isn't just a short-lived response, but a real paradigm shift, and I very much sense it is a paradigm shift. And then, of course, being an educator and working in a university, it's all about education. Educating the vets, the medics, the social sciences about this sort of approach. And just to go back finally to mention another name, of course, Charles Darwin studied medicine here at the University of Edinburgh. And that's a great example of how medical profession and veterinary profession and other sciences have become siloized, work in these silos. Charles Darwin, as a medic, learnt all about natural history, and as you know, went on to great things. But we've gone away from that and become entrenched in silos. We now need to come back together much more effectively, I think, to address these complex challenges.
Hi there, my name is Mark Shimamoto, and I'm the GeoHealth Program Manager at the American Geophysical Union, and I'm going to talk a little bit about how the geoscience community as a whole is playing a role at multiple levels of these different frameworks that you've heard about. And so for those who aren't familiar with AGU, it is an Earth and Space Science membership organization that has over 60,000 members across 144 countries, and so these scientists that are part of the AGU community span all the way from kind of folks who are studying deep space all the way down to Earth's inner core and kind of everything in between. And so more recently, around the same time planetary health started rising, there was this murmur and discussions within the geoscience community on kind of how to better interact and use the geoscience field to inform a lot of these conversations that we're seeing on global health. And so that was kind of the push to create this GeoHealth initiative and this GeoHealth program within the geosciences. And that was really focused at developing an intersection between the Earth, the environmental sciences, as well as ecological sciences, agricultural sciences, and of course, human health sciences. And so this is, again, kind of primarily driven through the Earth and space science community to kind of better understand, predict, and respond to some of the world's environmental health challenges or planetary health challenges, whether it's folks studying atmospheres to oceans, hydrology to soils, or even volcanology to geology. So they all play a role on this kind of exposure pathway. I like the diagram that was presented earlier, and can inform a more resilient solution. One example I like to highlight that can showcase how the geosciences has played a successful role in preventing health implications is Claire Patterson, a geoscientist in the 1960s, was studying ice cores and was able to determine that atmospheric levels of lead was being produced through industry sources, and led a very successful campaign to inform the public about the lead implications in fuel sources, which of course led to a very successful public health intervention that we're seeing still being implemented today. And so that's one great example. In terms of challenges, I think I can echo what some of my colleagues on this panel have said, that sciences traditionally can be siloed. Even within the geosciences, there can be some siloing that happens. And so to think more interactively, develop these core partnerships, developing conversations like this panel is having today is very important. And another challenge, and I think also opportunity, is to connect with other communities, maybe not necessarily science communities, but users of scientific information, as well as community voices, to really inform a more robust science and a more holistic approach that can ultimately lead us to a more informed and resilient decision. And so again, you know, coming from the AGU perspective, it's less of a framework, but more of a vehicle on how the geoscience community as a whole can play a role and be more active and coordinated and support a lot of the great work that you guys are doing. And so with that, I will stop. Thank you.
So I'm Andy Haynes. I'm from the London School of Hygiene and Tropical Medicine. I had the honor to chair the Rockefeller Lancet Commission on Planetary Health that reported in 2015. And in that commission, we tried to articulate a different vision of human health from the traditional global health vision, one which was trying to address the Anthropocene epoch, this new geological epoch in which we now find ourselves, which the global health community has not really fully taken on board. In doing so, we tried to develop this concept of planetary health being essentially the realization that human health and the health of human civilization is fundamentally based on the health of natural systems. And that's a viewpoint that I think we've lost in the biomedical agenda. It's not a new viewpoint. If you look back 3,000 years or so, Hippocrates wrote airs, waters, places. And I'm pretty confident that if Hippocrates had been living today, he would have probably been giving the keynote lecture here on planetary health. So it is an ancient tradition, but one that we've maybe lost. And it's very salutary to be here in Edinburgh, which played such an important role in the development of the Enlightenment, new thinking, to address kind of ancient superstitions and fears and bring the kind of lens of scientific rationality into modern civilization. And at this time in history, when we're faced with these dramatic changes, but also a resurgence in populism, nationalism, and ethnocentrism, it's doubly, I think, important to articulate a new vision, which is informed by science, but is not totally driven by science, because as we've heard very eloquently from Elder Francois Paulette, we also need to combine conventional Western science with the vision of indigenous knowledge and, importantly, I think, indigenous values. We need to respect the fact that ultimately our health and civilization depends very much on the natural systems of the small planet on which we live. So I think we need to be articulating this agenda to bring us towards a one planet, one healthy planet civilization and economic system. At the moment, if everyone wants to live like North Americans, of course we need something like 5 planets, and those are not available to us. So developing solutions, it seems to me, is a really important next step. We've heard a lot about what the problems are, and we need to understand those, of course, better, but developing solutions is crucial. And I want to go back to what Liz said in her introduction, the 3 challenges that we articulated in the Lancet Commission, the conceptual challenge. So at the moment, most of our political discourse is around the need for economic growth, and economic growth is important for the very poor. But once you get to a certain level of economic well-being and economic attainment, future or further growth doesn't bring much added value to humanity. So what we need to do is to reframe that political imperative and start talking much more about how we can sustain human health within the limits of natural systems in the Anthropocene epoch. And that's, I think, an agenda that we need to bring to the forefront of contemporary politics, and it's certainly not there at the moment. It doesn't matter whether you're on the left or the right of the political spectrum. People are not really talking about that. So we in the health profession and our colleagues in other linked professions can help, I think, try to bring that framework to the center of the political stage. Secondly, knowledge. We've invested many, many hundreds of billions in biomedicine. That's great. Many of our institutions have benefited from it. But if we look at what we've invested in planetary health and the allied disciplines, it's probably 0.01% or something absolutely minuscule. So we need to reorient the whole research endeavor to focus much more on these systems interlinked problems. And our universities, as we've heard at the moment, are not well configured to support this kind of research. We were all trained in rather narrow silos, and that's not the way the researchers of the future need to work. They need to be confident in hopping from one discipline to another and working with colleagues from very different disciplines, right the way from anthropology to mathematical modeling, respecting all those different traditions. And then finally, implementation. Of course, implementation research is a valid field in its own right, and we do need to understand the processes of implementation, how we can transform both individual behaviors, but also the behaviors of whole societies and civilizations. But there's also an important political dimension to that. I don't know how many political scientists there are or political economists in the room, but we need to bring them on board. Because, I think at the Paris Treaty, many of us had the kind of view, well, at least now we've achieved some kind of consensus. We're going to move forward now in a more or less rational way. All we need to do is to speed up progress. But that's actually not correct. We're actually seeing a big pushback now. We're seeing massive vested interests pushing back. They're not going to give up easily on the way in which they develop their business model. The world economy depends on people not paying the full economic costs. It depends in not paying the cost of externalities, sadly, for many of these industries. So I think we're also in for some major political challenges, and we in the scientific community, unfortunately, cannot stand back from that. We cannot be completely indifferent to it. We have to present the best available evidence, but we also have to speak truth to power, and where there are vested interests that are abusing their power and not paying the full economic costs of their activities, then I think we need to document that and to challenge that economic model, to come up with a more sustainable economic model which recognizes the planetary boundaries in which we all live, and we have to sustain ourselves on this small planet. Thank you very much.
Thank you all. So I guess a part of my remit here, and I'm not hearing a lot of support from the panel for it, was to bring out some of the distinctions between these frameworks and learn a little bit about some of the challenges that they've faced and whether they can teach us anything. And I'm hearing a lot of interest as expressed by Robin in kind of scrapping the distinctions entirely and just getting on with it, which I'm very sympathetic with. But before we do that, let me just ask you one more time if you see any important distinctions. I mean, Jonathan, you're a real leader in growing eco-health as a field. We have very strong representatives of One Health and Mark from this geo-health perspective. Are there meaningful distinctions between these frameworks that we can learn from, or should we just move on and assume we're all sort of talking about the same thing?
So my own opinion is actually the latter, because I think that the main difference between these movements has been in the origins of them. Conservation medicine and One Health mostly deriving out of the field of veterinary medicine and recognizing that the majority of our emerging new infectious diseases come from wildlife, and we have to understand wildlife health if we really want to know about our own species health. And of course, us in the MD world, we only deal with one species, so we're disadvantaged there. But personally, I think that really they're very similar, and it's mostly that the origin of these terms as to how useful it is to distinguish between them, I don't know. Frankly, my own opinion is recognizing the interdependence, the interlinkages, and as Andy said, in the Anthropocene epoch, to understand that these things are truly interlinked. How we approach it through either a One Health approach or planetary health or an eco-health approach, to me, I think they're very similar. And I don't see much value in separating them.
Other thoughts? Yeah, Anna.
Just to echo that, I very much agree with you, and I think we've got so many terms now: one world, one health, one medicine, eco-health, conservation medicine, planetary health. I think we are at great risk of getting confused and mired in all that, and not focusing on the very, very, the huge amount of common ground. I mean, it's all common ground. Sorry, all common ground. To me, I think one of the key differences, you asked for some of the differences. I think certainly from the One Health perspective, that was really driven sort of mid-2000s out of fear, out of zoonotic disease and global pandemics, and it was the WHO, FIO, OIE getting together and sort of framing that we need to act to save humanity against pandemics. And I think the worry for me is that all these movements, including One Health, are very anthropocentric, and I think we need to get back much more to that, the connection and the bigger picture and the conservation of biodiversity for biodiversity's sake as much as our own sake, and seeing that very holistic approach.
Can I just ask you all to speak a little closer to the mic so everybody can hear in the back?
So, I fully endorse what others have said. I think they're just different entry points into the same agenda, ultimately. I think we're all seeking the same kind of endpoint, which is a more equitable world where health and the health of natural systems is placed much more close to the policy center, but also we generate better evidence using systems-based approaches, bringing together these different disciplinary perspectives. And I think rather than trying to debate the finer points about the definition of these different frameworks, what we should seek is the kind of common way forward, particularly focusing on solutions and bearing in mind that we're going to need quite radical transformations of the world economy if we're going to get to a world in which we can sustain human beings and the biosphere. So we should be focusing much more on those solutions, I think, rather than the differences between us.
Yeah, I'm also looking at these all initiatives, and what they are teaching us is that we see the need of bringing more players into health. We assumed that as a doctor, you knew how to keep people well, and as a veterinarian, I assumed that I knew how to keep the animals well. But then we end up, meeting in a rabies club, for example, where a rabid dog has bitten a human being, and you as a medic need to know something about that dog, and I need to know about what happens when that virus gets into human. So through that, we learn that we need actually to understand each other, and to respect each other. So we bring more people into the equation. We bring more value by actually coming together. But what I'm seeing that was maybe a distinction was that every entry point has an emphasis. So One Health emphasized, to me it emphasized how to use the wildlife, the human, the domestic animals into preventing diseases in human, mostly. So the health was actually the health of the human, but these other two were actually, how are they actually affecting the health of the human? But so we are moving now forward through planetary health, the way I'm seeing it, in seeing it's not only healing the human and the animals, but it's also healing the planet, because probably a lot of what is happening to the human and the animals is because the planet is suffering. So I'm looking at it as, kind of now bringing all other sorts of frameworks together into one, which actually is encompassing all. And as you're saying, Andy, if we are putting up a mechanism of how, I think we are safe.
Hello? One thing I'll add is that I think each framework or discipline has some aspect of convening power. It was kind of developed and defined by that scientific discipline. And so I think that the opportunity we have now is to not lose momentum on the power that these different frameworks have to convene the right folks in the room, but then to connect them with some of these other initiatives to make sure it's not just kind of held in one community, but the conversations are much broader and more integrated.
Yeah, no, thank you so much. And we need to bring this to a close, but I think, couldn't be more delighted to hear a consensus that it's time to move past this conversation at some level. I think there are distinctions, and I think there are distinctions in history and background and constituencies, and I think those distinctions strengthen the sum of the parts in important ways. And in addition to the convening that Mark's talking about and the different constituencies that we can bring together under these frameworks, I would also offer that we bring different observations to the table, and those scientific observations are fundamentally the beating heart of the field itself. And so when Mark talks about, earth scientists looking at ice core data, that brings an unbelievable richness to all of us to think about, well, what are the implications of that data to our respective fields? When the biologists tell us that, the biomass of flying insects has dropped by 76%, the rest of us can start to think about, well, what does that mean for pollination services, and how does that connect to the work that Robin's doing around food production and food quality? And so all of these, the veterinary community has raised really, really important alarms about the spread of infectious diseases out of animal reservoirs and into human populations. And so all of these different observations that come from the disciplinary strengths behind these frameworks is enormously valuable. And the most pathetic thing that we could do is let all of these frameworks keep us apart when sharing that data and sharing these observations is so valuable. So thank you all for participating, and it's time for a coffee break.